Gardiane is related to beef bourguignon. However, as the name suggests, it's made with bull instead of steer. Bull meat is slightly different in flavor and difficult to find in many nations, especially the kind you really want for this dish, which is the gelatin-rich collar cut. I've made it here with a rather tough cut of bull because that's all I could find. Method and flavor are the same, but of course it's tougher if you don't use the collar. Also, this is traditionally served with rice, but I prefer buttery potatoes. Finally, Niçoise olives are a common and excellent addition, but unfortunately they are also non-existent in this part of Russia at the moment. If you have them, read the annotations for where to add the olives in. Use a vegetable peeler to cut 2 large strips off of an orange and try to get as little of the pith as possible. A little bit is okay, but don't get a lot. This is the bull meat. As you can see, I've already trimmed it and cut it into fairly large cubes. To this I'm going to add the quartered red onion as well as the orange peel strips that we cut earlier, some thyme, fresh thyme leaves, bay leaves, and then the vinegar. The red wine vinegar gets poured over the top, and finally enough red wine, I'm using Chianti in this case, enough red wine to cover it, which should be about 2 cups, 500 milliliters. And then push everything down, make sure there's enough wine to keep the meat submerged, put a lid on it, and refrigerate it. Then when the marinade time is up, you're going to remove the red onion pieces, the thyme, the orange segments, and just take them to a bowl. The thyme is actually going to be discarded. We're not going to use that anymore. The rest of the ingredients are going to be used as soon as you'll see. Pour the meat into a colander, let all of the juices run off, and let it stand like this for about 20 or 30 minutes. Then combine the onions, orange peel, and the other solids, and including the bay leaves, along with the cloves of garlic and the wine marinade that was drained off of the meat. Blend this very, very well. You want to use the medium fine perforations of a food mill for this. You can use a sieve, it will not be nearly as good. Get a food mill. If you're serious about cooking, get a food mill. This is one of those times where there's really no substitute. Now transfer the contents into a saucepan and bring this to a simmer on the back burner of a stove while you proceed. Remove the bull meat from the colander and place it on a paper towel, pat it dry. Then use freshly cracked black pepper. Be generous with it. Sprinkle it, make sure that every piece gets some. And then add sea salt. About a teaspoon is right for this amount of meat. Heat up a large non-stick pan, add olive oil to it. Be generous with the olive oil, enough to coat the bottom of the pan. In fact, swirl it to coat the bottom of the pan. Then add the bull meat in 2 batches. You want to cook it in half at a time so you don't overwhelm the pan, cool it down. Use a splatter guard, and at the back of the stove you should have that marinade coming to a simmer. Cook the meat until it's quite dark, but don't char it, don't go crazy. And then remove it and begin the other half cooking in the same pan. When the second half is cooked about the same amount, remove those pieces to the braising dish that you're going to use. Now pour a little bit of that simmering marinade into the pan to glaze it. You're going to use all of this in the next step. Now pour the deglazed pan contents over the meat in the braising dish, and then the rest of the marinade that you had simmering on the back of the stove also goes over the top of this. Now this is not a braise, really this is an oven cooked stew. If it was a braise, there wouldn't be nearly this much liquid. You braise with only a small amount of liquid. So this is really a stew, true stew. About once every hour, you take it out, remove the lid, give it a little stir, make sure it's not running dry, and then put the lid back on and return it to the oven. The meat is finally tender. You pour off the liquid, leaving the meat behind in the braising dish. Take the sauce, the liquid off of it, and begin cooking it down in a saucepan. When it starts to get very thick, close to the end, add a couple of tablespoons of ketchup. Continue stirring it. Let it get very thick before you add it back with the meat. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link. If you like my videos, look for my cookbook, now available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other internet bookseller sites. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.